Welcome. In today's episode, me and Brandon start talking about the inner child and how that concept might serve as a tool for healing the conditioning that we acquire throughout the decades spent in adulthood. With a childlike curiosity, we also investigate how the child sees, seeing the world anew through ever curious eyes that set fire to the current experience and unveils its aliveness. This aliveness is the stamp of the present moment, the feeling of now that each of us has access to. Make sure to check the timestamps to navigate throughout the presented topics. Also, if nature, well-being, and art is of your enjoyment, please come check the daily content we post at Woketype.com. Without further ado, here's the episode. See you around.
What's up? It's me, Brandon, and the infamous and super cool Rui.
Hey.
Today I thought we could talk about the inner child. And specifically, I thought we could talk about connecting with the inner child and like giving the inner child space in your normal adult life. Because I feel like that's definitely a part. At least for myself, I can speak for myself. I'm very much in touch with my inner child. He's very here. And I was actually having this conversation with a friend the other day, and I kind of came to the conclusion that honoring that part of yourself, that inner child, is kind of like where happiness comes from, because the inner child is the one that gets lit up. That's your part of you that has the enthusiasm for and zest for life and curiosity and wonderment and just raw enjoyment. And I think that honoring that part of ourselves can be fulfilling, can be just a really powerful kind of, if you have a practice, powerful part of your practice for getting into the vibe of just like, I'm here, I'm alive, I get to do this, and like, and zoning in and really getting out of the mental, logical, adulty world of like concerns of this and that, which can be really unfulfilling, and getting more connected to your being here-ness and powerful stuff, I think.
So that we are absolutely on the same page, what is your understanding of inner child?
So you start out as a child. That's your inner child is you, and then at some point, the demands of life and everything, they start to cause you to have to kind of grow up, and in doing so, you kind of have to refocus. You start getting invested in this life as it's been told to us, and you start erecting these parts inside of yourself to help you better navigate that, because at some point it's all going to be up to you. I feel like the inner child is our inner innocence. It is in touch with all the parts of ourselves that are interested in life as life. I think that's kind of what's coming up when I'm riffing on it.
Yeah.
I would be curious, like, what does that mean to you when you hear inner child? That's a good way to triangulate here.
When you spoke of innocence, that was the exact word that was in my mind all along. For me, the concept of inner child has very much to do with that, with innocence, and the transition or these suggestion that the inner child is somehow lost or has to be healed has to do with that loss of innocence, that purity that we are as babies, for instance, and in our early child life, and is progressively, I guess, smeared by what we acquire throughout life. So I think we are pretty much on the same page in that regard. I've never thought much about this, to be honest, but I know that it is a big subject on today's healing practices and psychology that goes deep. I think even there's also the thematics of also exploring uh, memories from childhood and all that. You know, it goes much deeper, maybe in my understanding. But yeah, I guess we are on the same page.
I guess basically you get all these ideas about the world and they get stale.
Mm.
They get so stale and you get so tired of them. But when you're not really understanding that dynamic, these ideas of the world become your world. And so adult life can really just knock you around a bit and you can really start to form these ideas that just don't even feel good. They're not enjoyable. And so you might see the world in an unenjoyable way. But the funny thing about looking at the world is you're really looking at yourself. So if you're not enjoying the world, you're probably not enjoying yourself in this moment.
Mhm.
Um, because
100%.
yeah, we can't really escape that you are the world. We are the world. Quite literally. These ideas we form about our environment and our world around us are really the reason they don't feel good is because on some level that's saying something about you. And so bringing that all the way back to the inner child is going to keep looking at everything with these fresh eyes, you know? And the inner child is less tied up in all those mental constructs and more in touch with what's here right now. And so making space for that in our lives in our daily lives and honoring that part of ourselves and giving it space and a voice I think can be really needed. At least specifically, I can speak for myself. I can say that that's been a big part of me feeling better. I I'll speak a little bit about myself and say probably about 3 years ago, I had this question and I wanted to know like can where does happiness come from basically, and can I choose happiness, or can is that possible? And through that course of that answering that question, which I feel at this point I have some pretty good answers. um the inner child was a big part of it. I kept getting those messages like reconnect with your inner child, give your inner child space, like play and everything else. Because I was I was taking the world so seriously. I was taking the world very seriously, and I was taking myself very seriously. I'm an adult and I have all these problems and there's all this stuff happening, and you just don't understand. I was very very serious. There's no time, you know. We're all gonna die. I don't know. Um, just I had developed this inner mantra, this all these stale, I call them stale because that's what they really were. They're just stale old ideas that I had about the world that is really hard to revisit them because they are confirmation bias. So I'm like, yeah, everything sucks, and then I step outside and somebody flips me off, and I'm like, see, I told you. It's just you're looking for it and you can see it and all that stuff. So a big part of that was reconnecting with those playful parts of myself that are just here to just be here and finding ways to make get in touch with that and bring that inner child into the conversation that I'm having with life all the time anyway.
I've been thinking similarly about, I think, the same, essentially the same what you were talking about, and that has to do with bringing freshness to each moment so that it doesn't get stale or dull somehow. So that freshness comes from the fact of removing, or the removal is a byproduct of seeing that all the concepts, all the knowing that we have acquired, things get stale by acquiring and by growing conceptually. So the Grand Canyon might be so beautiful the first time that we see it, and let's say that we go to the Grand Canyon every day for a month. So that sense of impact that we have, that freshness, decreases over time because we gain memories about it,
Wow.
and and it creates a conceptual framing of the experience. Each time that we go, we are not accessing the Grand Canyon directly, but we are assessing the Grand Canyon through the memories of the previous Grand Canyons.
Yes.
So for me, these freshness as to be seen um, as reality, as something more fundamental than the memories of the experience. I'm certain that everyone has had a taste of this freshness when the mind snaps in an experience where you see the Grand Canyon for the first time, for example, and all the concepts that we have, even of the concept of beauty, you might exteriorize and say, "Oh, this is beautiful," but even before that, when the mind is completely shut down and you're just left and immersed totally in the experience, that is the freshness that I'm talking about. And that is accessible by removing or rightly seeing reality as it is. And then the experience of freshness, of reality, of joy is naturally on the forefront without moving in the old ways, which is relating to experiences through the memories of previous experiences.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm totally vibing with that. That's literally what it is. I mean, once you only get to see the Grand Canyon once. And that's the first time. And then after that, you never see the Grand Canyon again, ever. No matter how many times you go there, you are no longer looking at the Grand Canyon. You are looking at your thoughts about the Grand Canyon. You are looking at your memories of the Grand Canyon. You're looking at your ideas about the Grand Canyon. And you're engaged with this soupy concoction that you're making all about the Grand Canyon, never ever looking at the Grand Canyon anymore. And so, yeah, you lose your sense of awe. Um, but I think as adults, we're taught to come to conclusions. They train us, man. When you're growing up, they literally, and I say they, society, but I mean, wait, this is a bit of a rabbit hole if we go too far, but essentially you,
Don't
because
say the Illuminati.
no, I was gonna say humans. We're humans are teaching ourselves. This is when I say they, I don't want it to sound like it's some outside person, because the they is us and the they is you, because you're human and part of your growing up is to be is to pass along this knowledge, this hard earned trial and error knowledge that we as humanity have been collecting about what is a good way to do things, because we didn't know and we're figuring it out. And I think, to ground all of that into, it's just very innocent that we get here. It's not a conspiracy. It's not some evil people with evil ideas or anything like that. It's just we're humans and the universe has never been human before and we're figuring out what it means to be human. So all of that coming back, part of your packaging, your programming, your lessons when you're growing up, they're literally teaching us how to think, how to conclude. Hey, if you see this, what does that mean? We don't think about it because it's just school, but literally we are having we're being shown the Legos and we're shown how to construct them and what are good constructions, what are bad ones. That's not the way, that's not it. That's not logical, little Benny. You didn't do that right, And so we have we have classes and things like that that are all designed to get you to think and see the world a certain way. And part of that is coming to conclusions. And I think this is very natural in the sense that this is a very human thing anyway. You're probably going to, in some way, come to do that anyway. It just may have not been the best way. We've been doing this for thousands of years now. And so we found some really great ways that to go about looking at the world, and will help you survive and all this other stuff. So anyway, that being said, I think we are taught to come to these kind of conclusions and then use those conclusions to build new ones. You know what I'm saying? So we're always engaged with this mental traffic and our mental ideas of the world. And so very, very, very rarely as you get older are you ever actually looking at the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you start to believe in your ideas about the world, and the more you start to believe in and feel confident in your ability to create and manage them, the less of the world you see. You'll go out and you could go into a whole new environment, but you don't even see it. You just see buildings. The word building, you know what those are. You see people, you have an idea of what people are. You're just meeting your mental constructs over and over again, unless something can happen that's so outside of of your categorization that you have to look again. And I think connecting with the inner child can help you to do that intentionally, to kind of drop that and kind of reconnect with what is here, what is fresh, what is actually going
Hmm.
on here. If I don't try to say what's going on, because the truth is, reality is already talking. It's telling you what it is. It's telling you what it is so hard that you can come to a conclusion about it. And it is from this telling that we form our ideas about it. And so if we can get quiet, if we just really be quiet internally, you can really start to listen. And reality is telling you all the time what it is, and that's indescribable. So anyway, if we can reconnect with that, then you can start letting that freshness in to your experience, and you can step out of the gated community that you've erected in your mind about what reality and the world is. And I think the inner child can be definitely a gateway or a key um, to having a more direct felt sense of reality.
Beautiful. I love that, and share the sentiment in all the things that you said. One thing that I want to ask: how does that exploration of the inner child look in your practice? I guess do you use these as some form of poetic or metaphor to inquire yourself, or do you, for instance, revisit certain aspects of your memories as a child? How does that work practically for you?
Yes, yes, and yes. I would say first of all, I would be remiss to not mention this. I do have ADHD, as we all know, and it's actually quite common in our communities. We're very known to people see us often as big children. So I've always been very very in touch with this inner child aspect of myself. Now, as I got older, I locked him up in the basement at some point, and we weren't really talking anymore. But part of my practice was getting re in touch with that, and yeah, using memory. Um, and not I had to be careful because I don't want to go back and mine the memory for like a judgment of like, was this a good memory or a bad memory. I just want to open up to the inner child of me was remembering of it, and whatever it is, that part of you has a voice. And so like part of it was of course reconnecting with those memories and letting those up. Sometimes it's finding little things that bring whimsy into my life. Doing things just because. Some of it is like stepping off of these rails, getting out of this rut that I've been in about being an adult and these ideas about the world, and reconnecting to what's fresh. So I do a lot of little things. You know what I like to do that's really fun? Sometimes I just smile for no reason. I'm driving and I'll just put a smile on my face and I'll hold it there. And I just do it, it's funny because all these the mind comes up and it's like, what? That's not real. You don't really feel happy. Why are you smiling? All these things come up, but I do it anyway, right? Because why not? And I think it's kind of silly. And then sometimes I find what at one moment was a forced smile will just suddenly deepen all by itself, and it's a bigger smile, even goofier smiles on my face, and I start to feel this little lightness back there. Um, so sometimes I'll just follow impulses, like a little impulse will come up to do something really silly, and I'll just do it, and I'll do it fully invested. I might just do a little dance, or I'll be really silly. I'm actually a very silly person, so a lot of my inner child work is about letting those walls down because I well, when you're growing up and people you can't be like that. I had to learn how to be an adult because I was 20 years old, and I'm
Hmm.
trying to get into these serious workplaces, and I look really young. um and I might be really smart and have all these answers, but no one would see them because they thought I was just young, you're immature, and you don't know anything. And so in order to get that seat at the table, you start to, I'm very serious actually, and you start trying to do that. So a lot of it has been unwinding that. So for me personally, the reason I mentioned all that was because I already was very in touch with this part of myself. And so um some of the people I was working with later, they reminded me of that, and then that helped me reconnect with it. But I've always have felt that part of myself. and I was walking around the world and I would see people and I just felt like I was the only kid and there's all these adults. And I still to this day am like have to kind of remind myself like, oh, I am grown up. I'm an adult. Oh yeah. Because I'm always looking around for the adults so they can figure it out. So yes, anyway, to answer your question, yeah, sitting back with memories, I like to go back there. Oh, I've noticed now also if I because of my general practice, sometimes memories just come up where I'm out and about and something will remind me and and it takes me all the way back to this place and this time and I just revel in it. And I feel like that's my little inner child speaking up. I don't know what he's saying all the time. Sometimes it's just an image. Sometimes it's just a feeling of a place can jimmy something and loosen. I'm like, hey, that reminds me of something, and then I remember what it is, and then the place comes or the memory comes, and I think it's starting a dialogue with your inner child. I think it's
Do you
becoming.
get a lot of those memories of being a child?
Oh yeah, man, that was big time for me. My mom used to be really impressed with me because I remember things from being like 2, 3. Um,
Mm,
my memory was I've always had very strong memories. I think my earliest memory was like even being in the crib. It's very vague, but I can remember
wow.
the little what are those things called that they put over the
Like the toy.
yeah, the little toy that dangles over it. I
Yeah.
forgot what that thing's called, but I can kind of
Yeah.
vaguely remember it. I remember my blanket. I had a little blanket. It was white and orange and had like little zoo animals on it. So I have like very vague memories about that. But
Yeah, that's pretty rare.
yeah,
Yeah.
it,
It's pretty special.
oh well, yeah. I guess so. Right? It doesn't feel like that to me. But I just assume
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
does. But yeah, I have a lot of memories from childhood, and it all feels very fresh and real to me sometimes. So
Awesome. Yeah. I was just thinking that, when we have just been talking of this aspect of freshness and the inherent freshness of reality of this moment. And I've been reading Nisargadatta Maharaj, and if you don't mind, I want to read a snippet of what he said that ties to this, I think.
yes, please.
There is something exceptionally unique about the present event, which the previous or the coming do not have. There is a livingness about it, an actuality. It stands out as if illumined. There is the stamp of reality on the actual, which the past and the future do not have. Then there is a question from someone: what gives the present that stamp of reality? And he answers: there is nothing peculiar in the present event to make it different from the past and future. For a moment, the past was actual, and the future will become so. What makes the present so different? Obviously, my presence. I am real, for I am always now, in the present, and what is with me now shares in my reality. The past is in memory, the future in imagination. There is nothing in the present event itself that makes it stand out as real. It may be some simple, periodical occurrence like the striking of the clock. In spite of our knowing that successive strokes are identical, the present stroke is quite different from the previous one and the next as remembered or expected. A thing focused in the now is with me, for I am ever present. It is my own reality that I impart to the present events.
Wow, wow. What is this? What was that? This guy's name again?
Nisargadatta Maharaj. It is. Have you ever heard of the I Am That book?
Oh yes,
It is a pretty famous book on the non-dual community.
yeah. I haven't. I don't know if I've read "I Am That," but I've heard of it because we frequent the same spaces.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think it is something that matches to what we've been saying, that there's this stamp of reality on each moment that is completely unique yet completely mundane, I guess, because it's always there. It's the fresh print that is always coming out. It never runs out of print. It's always coming out, constant, not in the future, not in the past, but both the past and eventually the future, if when they appear in the scope of the now, both get the print of nowness, of freshness that we have been talking about.
Something else that came to mind that's similarly related is that what a gift it is that we have this constructed this ability to construct and live in this reality, because the contrast is so sweet. When we step out of that back into the present, it's delicious. It's like, wow. um I think there's a level of appreciation that can only come from seeing it the other way and then coming back to it as what it is. And I think there's some juice in there. I don't know if I'm highlighting that, but there's something to be said about that, where it's like, okay, there's reality as we conceive it, and then there's reality as it is, which includes our conception of it. But then going into but the contrast between those two, it feels good, man.
Mm.
It can when you notice it, but it can actually feel terrible if you're leaning too hard into the constructed reality. Then it's unpleasant, actually, because the distance between what is and what is thought can be very painful. But
Mm.
to swing the other way, to lean into what is true versus what was conceived, can feel very sweet and can feel good, can feel of ease.
Yeah.
So kind of like that whole you can't appreciate happiness without sadness kind of situation. Like, it's the whole thing coming together that makes it so enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think ultimately there's the reconciling of both. Like there's, the usual path of seeking is this wave of ease, and then somehow there's this contraction, and it always goes like that.
Yeah.
Contraction, ease. And I think the reconciling of both has to do with seeing essentially the supreme ease that has always been the case in both the ease that I spoke of and the contraction. So I think more and more there's the waves collapse in the sense of, a sine wave that goes up
Yeah.
and down. So the frequency, instead of having the upper wave and then the wave that goes below the horizontal line, that kind of movement stretches. So and if you stretch that wave, it becomes more and more close to the horizontal line that is running always in the same place. And that stretching is my analogy to point to the supreme ease that comes with essentially with the process of the spiritual path, right? Things can happen, but you don't get so you can you don't get into this roller coaster of um emotions, and it doesn't produce so much suffering, because I
Yes.
think at the end of the day, the only metric that it is important is if you are happy or at peace or not, and that's that's the most important thing. What else matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was reminded while you're talking of kind of like it's kind of like what you're talking about is like it's kind of like being at ease with the nature of the wave itself. Like, there's no problem
Exactly.
if it's up or down. It's okay because it's a wave.
Exactly.
Kind of like playing a video game. Um, when you turn the game's on. Okay, so you turn it on. You're winning, you're losing. You're still playing the game. The game is on.
Hmm.
When That's kind of like what life is, and that's kind of like coming to that realization, because the win state in the video game and the fail state in the video game are all within the same game, and it's operating correctly when you see that lose screen and when you see the winning screen, it's operating correctly in both ways. And the game is enjoyable because there's a lose screen and because there's a win screen and because how they come together and all those interesting ways. The fact that the game is happening is what is the point. And it doesn't matter while you're playing the game, even if you're losing, that might be frustrating, but that frustration from losing can make the winning so good, feel so good. And if you're winning too much, you might start feeling good that you start losing, to be honest. You're like, finally, it's got a little bit harder, you know? And so then at some point, you're just enjoying the game itself in its totality. It doesn't matter what's happening, the game's on. Yes. And that's kind of the same kind of thing that happens with this realization here. When you're not so invested in the character on the screen and you're more invested in the life itself as it's progressing, then all of the states, all of it is great in a sense. It's all going perfectly. It's all going right.
I love that analogy. It makes perfect sense to me, the picture you have just painted. I love that. And I guess if you don't want to say anything else, we might as well end beautifully here.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.